Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan. I'm glad to have you with me today. And today we have a very special guest on the show. He is author Justin Germain, who writes under the pen name Demetrios Lopez. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. And today we're going to be talking about Justin's series, the Sigma series, and his book that he just released on July 15th called Thumos Rising. And Justin, before we dive into the book, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am a Greek and Latin teacher in Dallas, Texas. I also teach a little bit of ancient history, just a big fan of the classics. Um, a bit of an interesting story. When I was an undergraduate in college, someone gave me a book called Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. And I don't know if people are familiar with him, but he's written several great books, and it was about the ancient Spartans fighting the Persians at the Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BC. 300 is based off the same battle, for those that might be more familiar with that, the film 300. I just read the book and I just fell in love with ancient history. It's still the best novel I've read to this day. So that made me want to learn all about the Greeks, and then later the Romans, and then before too long I'm in grad school doing Greek and Latin. I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas, so fairly local, but I am I'd say uniquely traveled. I don't know about well traveled, but I've been to some interesting places. I was in the military, both active duty and reserves for a few years, and I went to places like the Caribbean and Latin America. Everyone's like, oh, they send me to the Middle East, but in my case, they send me to the Caribbean. I guess someone's got to take one for the team, right? And then I actually lived as an expat for a little while in Ecuador, and I was actually living in a city named Tena, which was inside the Amazon jungle. So kind of been around a little bit. The most important job in my life is being a dad. I have a beautiful little girl that just turned 6. She's had a lot of fun with daddy writing a book. So anyway, that's a bit of an intro to me. So I'm just a classics nerd that grew up loving fantasy and sci-fi, and here I am writing my first book.
Okay, very cool. Justin, I've got to say, when someone tells me they've spent time living in the rainforest, the first thing that comes to my mind is like living in this hut in the middle, like surrounded by trees and fending off like giant snakes and spiders every day.
So I can't say it was that. It really is interesting. They say you can't see the forest for the trees, and sometimes I'm not sure if you can see the forest for the streets. I mean, I was in a city, but the city was built in the jungle, right? So, I mean, just think of maybe something a very rurally placed city that's sort of out there, kind of in the woods. And in this case, the woods was just the Amazon rainforest. Now, of course, once you got beyond it, then it became something like out of an Indiana Jones movie, right? So I never, yeah, there was no wrestling giant spiders or anything like that. I will say at one point I punched a rather large jungle rat. That's a very interesting story. It was kind of an accident. If I'd have known it was a large rat, I probably wouldn't have punched it. I'd have been too scared, but it was dark and I didn't know. And it was just seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
When you say large rat, how big are you talking here?
Oh, I'd say about like that. I don't think it was actually a rat. I think it was related, but I think it was some other kind of South American jungle specific rodent animal. I got to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure of the nomenclature, but I mean, again, it was a unique experience, different culture. The part that Ecuador that I was living in the jungle, there are people there that don't speak Spanish. They speak their native language, which was Quechua. So it was just a very unique life experience. And one of my best moments, I think I can say, was at one point, me and some friends rented a room. Some other Americans that happened to be living there, and we just sort of found each other. We wanted to watch the Super Bowl, like Americans, right? And have a beer. And of course, down there, American football is not, kind of unheard of. But I remember at one point walking out on a balcony, and the place, the hotel, the hostel we were staying at was raised up kind of on a hill. And you could see the city and you could see the jungle sort of swallowing the city. And then you could see the mist rise from off the jungle as the sun was setting. And it was very picturesque. I mean, it's one of those kind of scenes that sure tugs at the heartstrings.
Uh, that sounds like quite a sight there. Uh,
Mm.
did you, during your stay there, did that help inspire your writing at all? Any aspect of it?
It actually did, in the aspect of all of the people were just so very different, right? And I think it, of course, we know just sort of living, in the States, you go down the street, you meet five different people, you're going to get five different opinions. There's just a lot of diversity, right? Of just like thought and how people feel about different things. But I think a lot of times when we think of other countries, we're like, oh, the Germans feel like this and the Australians feel like that. But again, they're just people too, and they're just like us, right? And it was very interesting being there and seeing all of the different. I don't think feuds would be appropriate, but just the little ways that people communicated about other people living in different parts of the country and even sometimes different parts of the city. It, from an outsider's perspective, it almost didn't make sense in a way, right? But for them, I mean, within that culture, I mean, they've been living there and living that way, and there's just been history after history after history, going back generations after generations. Some people there trace their family lineage back to before the arrival of the Spanish. So you're talking 500 years. It was just very unique. And in respect to the book, what I wanted to do is paint a very complex world, which is what I saw there. I mean, that's what I saw in the military. I think there's a lot of beauty in the gray if if you have the right light to shine on it, so to speak.
Okay, cool. Justin, let's dive into the Sigma series here. What's that all
Yeah.
about? Can you tell us a bit about it?
Right. So at some point about 10 years ago, I wanted to read a novel, a fictional, an adult style novel based on the characters from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And I'm not entirely sure how old you are, Dan, or what part of sort of nerdy fandom you're a part of, but I was the part in the early 80s. I grew up on He-Man and Transformers and Thundercats, and I loved it. I ate it up. And He-Man was always my favorite, and I always said that He-Man in some ways almost peaked before his time. But the world of Eternia was, of course, very magnificent. It was part Conan the Barbarian. It was part Star Wars with spaceships and dragons and magic and laser guns and the whole nine yards. And I went to Barnes and Noble. I was looking for some kind of fictionalization. Again, you see this with Star Trek, Star Wars, Spider-Man, some of the more popular IP. And I just couldn't find anything like it. And I was almost offended that no one had written at least one He-Man book. I mean, I just wanted one, right? And so I just went home and started writing a He-Man fanfic, and I wrote the book that I wanted to read. And as I continued to work on it, I kind of said, well, I think I can tell a much better story if I break away from, the fan fiction from the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, leave that lore behind. And again, somewhat inspired, my world very much looks like the world of Eternia, again, with both fantasy and sci-fi elements. But do it my own way, again, heavily inspired by the classics, Greek mythology, Spartan society, the Romans, those kind of things. And ultimately, just little by little, it evolved. It became something completely different. And after you work on something that long, I think it just sort of makes sense that you want to put it out there and see how people respond to it. And so eventually I was able to find an indie publisher that was willing to take a chance on the book. And so here we are. It's been an incredible journey. And in some ways, everything came together very quickly once I started writing. But then again, it's been cooking in some ways for decades. I remember playing the basic plot of the book. I remember playing it out with my He-Man toys when I was 8. And it just never went away. So that was the basic plot of book 1. And so, book 2, book 3, you got to read, I guess, to get there. But there you go.
Okay. So is your protagonist, is he kind of based off of He-Man?
Very much based off of He-Man. And my take on He-Man was always, okay, he is the mix of Superman and Conan, right? Again, set in this very unique world. What I wanted to do with my main protagonist, whose name is Zeno, again, a Greek name and a name that's based off the founder of ancient Greek Stoicism. What I wanted to do with this character was I wanted to explore the philosopher king idea put forward by Plato and very much attested to by the ancient Stoics. But again, he is kind of a messianic character, Superman, Paul Atreides has a lot of that in him. Harry Potter, right? So the real sort of through line, not just in this book, the first book in the series, but really through the entire series, is Zeno continually learns and understands more about his powers and what they allow him to do. And he has very much godlike powers, but the challenge is going to be, can he have these divine powers and still maintain his humanity? Or is he Dr. Manhattan style, for those out there that know Watchmen? The more divine he gets, does he just check out and says, okay, well, I mean, the lives of these little people, not really something I could be concerned with. And that's a struggle. And it really is a struggle that he goes back and forth with in the book and through the series. There'll be times where, as a reader, you'll be reading and you'll be like, you'll almost be scared for him. You'll be like, oh no, he's losing his humanity. And then there's times where I think hopefully the reader will be clapping for how Frodo style resistant he is to this temptation of absolute power. And you just got to see where the character lands at the end of the series.
Okay, is it a trilogy or longer than that? Shorter than that?
It's going to be longer. So I am envisioning 7 books. I will tell you, Dan, that the second one is already written, and I sent it, as a matter of fact, to my publisher a couple weeks ago at the end of August. And I am writing book 3 right now as a way of a little bit of a preview. As soon as I get off this podcast with you, it's sort of my Friday night writing, hour and a half, as I like to say. I'm currently writing a major battle scene that happens underwater between a civilization of mer people, mermen, mermaids, their technology, their sea monsters, the whole 9 yards, and my protagonist Zeno, who's coming against them with a army of robots and androids that he created himself. And we're gonna have to find out how that works out. So yeah, there's gonna be 7 books in the series, and I think I needed that much time to really flesh out his journey. But also, again, there's a very colorful cast of supporting characters. I have just a real monster of an antagonist here, and I think it's going to be the kind of villain that people love to hate. But I need the time. He also has a very intricate backstory, and so you just need the time to fully put everything out there. And then wrap it up. As I've told some of my ARC readers and people that have read book 2 and what I've done so far with book 3 is, I think by the end people will be happy with how these characters land. But again, just like a good song, a good book, it's all about the journey, right? And the journey, I think, is going to keep people glued to their seats.
Do you have a favorite character?
Well, again, I guess I could tell you that my favorite character is Zeno, my main protagonist, but
Okay.
that's almost a cheat, right? I don't know if that really tells you exactly what you want to know. I will tell you the character that I sort of longingly look at the most is a character that's based off my uncle, who had a huge influence in my life. He's a bit. I'll say this. He's just a little bit. He's different. One might refer to him as the crazy uncle, but crazy in a good way, right? Not crazy in like, okay, we don't know what he's going to do, but just he sort of says the thing that everyone's thinking, and he just. So I have one character that's very much based off him and is named after his son, which they both really they thought it was hilarious when they read the first draft of the book. And yeah, I just I guess I have a really soft spot for that character. He's very much the comic relief in the book, particularly in the second half.
Okay. Uh, Tell us a little bit about the content itself. Is it very action packed? Is it geared towards mostly adults?
Definitely geared towards adults. This when I'm telling it to sort of a general audience, if I had an elevator pitch, I would say, again, kind of like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, it's like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, right? But that's not entirely accurate. It definitely has an edge on it. And it's meant to have an edge on it, and it's meant to probe some deep philosophical questions. It's supposed to be genre art that aspires to really explore the deepest questions of human existence and the universal questions, right? That we've all been struggling with, and then just our species has been struggling with from the beginning. So it definitely has an edge. I would say a closer comp would be something like Dune meets Game of Thrones, and that the world of Dune just feels very different than Star Wars. The stakes feel very higher. When there is violence, it feels more real. And of course, there's just deeper philosophical points that you get in Dune that you don't necessarily quite get in Star Wars, right? And again, there is plenty of sex, blood, and violence and cussing and all that stuff for those that like those kind of things. So in that regard, very much kind of geared toward Game of Thrones. In respect to the writing style, Dan, I got to be honest with you. If people have read Stephen Pressfield books, it is, to me, I feel like my writing style is probably closest to his. Again, he's my favorite author, so that kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. There's definitely a little bit of Madeline Miller in there as well, for those that are familiar with Circe's Song of Achilles. But yeah, this first book, I would say, is more plot focused. The first 2/3 of the book, very much getting to know the characters. It's not chronological. But then once you get to about 66% of the way in, that's when all the timelines come together and we're just off to the races. And it's really a runaway train until you get to the very end. Second book will be a little bit more character focused all the way throughout, but this one, it's sort of loaded on the front end.
Okay. Now you mentioned that you're aiming for about 7 books here. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have do you have it planned out all the way? Like, do you know exactly how you want the series to end, or are you just kind of taking it one book at a time?
That is a really great question. And the answer is it's almost a yes, no, right? I guess that's not fair. I can tell you that I know what the finish line looks like. Now, exactly how we get to the finish line, that I'm not entirely sure. And I guess just to give a very prominent example, my main female protagonist in the book, in the love interest, whose name is Alexandra, in their initial draft, I wrote her in a very particular way. And again, if for those that again know He-Man, she was based off Tila, based off the Tila character. For those that are familiar with the Robert E. Howard, Conan short stories, Belta from Queen of the Black Coast, very much based off that kind of character. But as her story unfolded and as the character arc came back down, I didn't her ending didn't feel authentic, right? I had a way that I wanted the story to end in my mind as the narrator, but as I got to the end, I just said, "Look, Alexandra wouldn't do that. She just wouldn't do it. She wouldn't let herself get in that situation. It just didn't feel true to the character." And all that to say, these characters take on a life of their own. And in the case of her, I had to very much rewrite how her story came to an end in the first book. And again, it just kind of reminds me of a little story that people used to say about Robert E. Howard, author of the Conan short stories, about how that character in particular very much took on a life of its own. And he would talk about how on some of his drunken binges, when he's drinking and writing and drinking and writing, he would have these visions and nightmares of the character coming to him in his sleep, axe in hand, and demanding, okay, you're going to write my story, but you need to write a particular way. And you need to go back and rewrite this other one because I don't like the way you did that. And again, I haven't seen any of my characters in my sleep yet. Maybe I'm just not drinking enough. I don't know. but but again, they kind of demand that their stories tie up on their own terms. I really think that that's true. So again, I have this general sense of kind of where everything's going to land. But again, in respect to the journey, I don't know. In some ways, it's an adventure for me too, and I've kind of got to wait to see how the characters develop. And if you force it too much, it just doesn't feel authentic, and I think it comes out in the writing.
Justin, what would you say is the most challenging part of the writing process for you?
Far and away, it's promotion. I am just not someone that I didn't have any social media until this book. I was not on Facebook. I was not on anything. I mean, for the first 6 months, I thought TikTok was some kind of new iWatch or something, smart watch. I really was that sort of clueless. But again, the publisher sat down and I really had a great publication team that worked with me, very much educated me. They said, look, I mean, you're going to have to put yourself out there. it is what it is. There's a lot of great books out there on the market. If you want yours to stand out, you're going to have to go and you're going to have to sell it. And a lot of that happens now in the digital world. And so I have something like 94 Instagram videos, and you can find those under my pen name, Demetrios/Lopez on Instagram. I just recently got on TikTok, and I have a few videos on TikTok as well. I'm going to try to upload a little bit more to TikTok. And Dan, once I get into the groove, it's fine. But I swear, I'll go through these periods where I'll make like 5 or 6 videos a night. I'll just set aside an hour, hour and a half and do it. And once I get going on video 2, 3, 4, I'm great. But I spend so much time on video 1. It's so challenging for me to get into the groove, and I said something wrong, or I just ran out of a second. So it is tough. But I also have tried to have fun with it, and I think I'm getting better at it. The views are slowly increasing, so I guess maybe
Oh, good.
that's encouraging.
Yeah, that's always a good sign. Uh,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your pen name, Demetrios Lopez. Is there a story behind that name?
There is. So my father's last name was Lopez, and that's the one that I wanted to take for the pen name. As far as Demetrios goes, my mother was a quarter Greek, and that makes me obviously an eighth Greek, and I teach ancient Greek. And I love Greece as a country. Got to spend some great time there at the American Academy, which is kind of like a tourist program, but for scholars. And so it's everything sort of like amped up a little bit. All that to say, it was a very strong Greek name, and Lopez was my dad's last name, so everything seemed to fit. Initially, I kind of had this sense, and there's this J.K. Rowling quote where she's talking about Harry Potter, and she says something to the effect of plotted in darkness. She wrote that first story, and there was almost this, okay, I'm going to write it. No one knows that I'm writing it. I got a publisher. I'm going to put it out. Let it go. No one needs to know my name, which of course is kind of ironic now because everyone knows her name. But that was kind of my initial thought. But again, that first Potter book was published in a different world, and this is now the digital world. I realized pretty quickly that if I want to sell this book and get it out there and give it a chance to succeed in the world, I was going to have to do a lot of promotion myself. And for me, that meant putting my face, my likeness out there, to some degree opening people up almost kind of to your home in a way, because you're making these, at least I am making these videos in my home, and just being very human, very honest, and very open, and dare I say vulnerable. So everyone knows it's me, but that was after the editorial decision was made to go with the pen name, and at some point you can't turn back. So the name on the book is Demetrios Lopez, but it's me.
Justin, you mentioned that you're a teacher. What grade do you teach?
So I actually teach at a university, and
Okay.
I have sort of all levels of, from freshmen to seniors that take my class. It's I did teach at I used to teach middle school and some high school, which was a blast. And again, the kids are just so interesting. Some of the funny stories I could tell of the kids at that age, right? But it was also very educational for me, right? And I always say that hopefully a good teacher comes in with this attitude, okay, I'm learning with you rather than me just teaching you, because when you start opening and engaging in conversations, you really do, if you're paying attention, learn as much from your students as I think they learn from you half the time. So it's been fun. But I've been teaching at a university. This is my 8th academic year at the university. I'm really enjoying it, hoping to get a study abroad program started in Greece. So again, you can sort of tell kind of all my creative and professional endeavors sort of orbit the land of the gods and heroes.
Do you incorporate any of that Greek mythology into your book?
Yes, although I would say I've really gone to great pains to, because now there's so many retellings that are so popular, right? I mean, it's not just Madeline Miller. I mean, you've got just there's Stone Blind, there's now I'm like forgetting, but I mean, there's just so many authors and titles that are along that line, and even something like Gilded, right, which is about King Midas, but it's kind of set in a fantasy world. It's a little bit different. I wanted to make it stand out, and then okay, this is this isn't Greek mythology, but it's inspired by Greek mythology, right? So I would say the way the influences, the classical influences show up with me in very many ways. Again, Zeno's struggle, having divine powers, yet maintaining his humanity. That is something that Stoics would have very much recognized and something they would have explored. In some ways, the whole thing is a bit of an allegory for Stoicism, loosely. But even the title, obviously, the Sigma series, and again, it's just the Greek letter Sigma on the cover. Again, the story behind that is Sigma starts the Greek word Sophia, which is the Greek word for wisdom. And very much the premise of the book is that a proper understanding of wisdom and a surrender to it will save you and will save the world. Also, there's a bit of again, it's a Greek S, a Sigma is, so it's also Superman, right? There's a little bit of that too, right? A little bit of an Easter egg. Thumos. Thumos is a Greek word. You see it all the time in the Iliad and the Odyssey. You see it constantly in other Greek works, even in the Christian New Testament. Odysseus is constantly being wounded in his thumos, and it's very hard to translate into English. It's pride, it's consciousness, it's strength. It can be rage, it can be sorrow. It very much is contextual and depends on what it is. But it does seem to be that essential characteristic that all Greek heroes and heroines have. And in the book, Thumos is a character from an alien world whose power Zeno eventually inherits. And so again, he's got to like raise up under it. Again, it's also the characteristic that he has that makes him a hero as well. Other than that, again, I have gods, and most of my gods are shamelessly stolen from Greek and Latin words. Some of the backstories with that are again very much Greek and Latin oriented. So yes, definitely inspired by mythology, although I would say almost in a shadowy way.
Okay. Have any of your students read the book?
They have. So to be honest with you, Dan, I kind of struggled because again, my initial thought was, publish it, kind of put it out there, and just let it go, right? But at one point, it came out that I was writing this book. One of my colleagues knew, and she told some students, and then word sort of gets around. And so what happens eventually is I walk into class one day and I was like, "Tell us about your book. Tell us about your book." And so I just said, "Okay, listen. If you guys want the book, I'll send you. Anybody that wants the book, I'll just send you a free PDF. So just like no questions asked." And again, a lot of them are like, "Yeah, I definitely want the book because they probably want extra credit is what they really want. They want to get on my good side." But several of them did read it, and they really seemed to enjoy it. Overall, the book has done pretty well. Again, it's brand new and just published it less than 2 months ago. But I think I have something like 17, 19 Goodreads reviews, and it's setting at a 3.9. I've got a 4.6 on Amazon, although I have fewer reviews on Amazon. It just you had some of the ARC readers got a chance to review it before the release on Goodreads, so we had a bit of a head start. And then I will say the book did win an award from Literary Titan. It won the Gold Award for releases in June, and that just wasn't with fantasy. That was competing against all genres, the Literary Titan reviews across the board. So far, I got to say the reception has been pretty good.
Oh, cool. Did you have any kind of expectations when it was released of what the reception would be?
Gosh, Dan, I mean, it's so personal, and it's almost. I fought very hard not to. But again, I'm human too. I mean, you want people to like your book, right? And it's like you can read, review after review after review. You could have 5 just glowing 5-star reviews in a row, but you get one-star review, and you're just like, you're looking over it and you're agonizing over it. You're like, oh no, they didn't get this part. Why didn't they understand it like everyone else understood it? But I fought really hard just to let that go. I can honestly tell you, I do not check Goodreads on a super regular basis. So even though it may be a little bit different from what I told you just now, but the last time I checked it, that's what it was. And to me, it was really about the process. Even if I knew this book would not sell any copies and everyone would hate it, I got to be honest with you, I still would have published it. And it's because I love it. It means so much to me. It makes me so happy. And I got to say, at this point, I feel like I owe it to Zeno. His story demands to be told. So I think in so many ways it is about, and I think probably a lot of content creators, regardless of your media and platform, would probably agree with this, right? You got to redefine success. If you're getting your voice out there, if you feel like you're being true to that inner voice, then I think you got to say that's pretty damn good. And I can say I sleep pretty good at night, feeling like as of right now I've done right by my characters.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And I got to think you don't want to take any feedback too personally either, because I mean,
Right.
it's writing is so subjective. Like I've looked at reviews online for some of my favorite books, and I see people talking smack about it. And then I look at reviews for like a book I hated, and people are like, "Oh, this is the best book ever." So
That's
I mean,
amazing. Yeah.
opinions vary so much. Um, do you have a favorite aspect of writing? Like, do you like working on characters, plot, setting?
Ooh, that's a good question. I I think for me, I'd have to give it to world building just by a hair, just a little bit. There's just something so freeing about being able to go in and create a history, and I think some of it may be because I'm a student of history, by trade. I mean, that's what I kind of do for a living, right? Study cultures and study history and teach those. But going in, and I very much wanted the world, and the fictional world that the Sigma series is set in is the world of Nineveh. And Nineveh is a world that's full of, again, all kinds of fantastic creatures. You were talking about some other links to Greek mythology. I have centaurs. I've already said I have mermaids. I have angels, not in a divine religious sense, but it's just a race of human beings with wings that live high up in the mountains. And they have basically two different civilizations, tribes, and they're always at war with one another, right? I have cyclopses. I have trolls. Of course, I have dragons. I have sea dragons. I've got leviathans, sea monsters, all these different things. But also in respect to the people, I really wanted a world that was as diverse as ours. And the history nerd in me, and kind of the military nerd too, always sort of had this question: okay, what would happen if you took an army of samurai, for example, and set them up against the Spartans? Or what would happen if you took, Comanche light cav and put them against something like armored medieval style knights on horseback? And so, pretty much all of the civilizations in Nineveh are based off pre-industrial civilizations. The Elids, as I call them, look very much like the ancient Greeks because they are. The Romani look very much like the Romans because they kind of are Romans, right? The katanas and the Taidamaru. Well, I mean, I guess katana kind of says it all, right? You can probably guess who they're based off of. So throwing them all together and sort of actually playing, okay, what would happen if these two armies from different parts of the world, different times in history, met each other? And you're going to give them aircraft, and you're going to give them projectile technology. They're not laser guns in the book, but effectively laser guns, right? Like advanced weaponry and ballistics. How does that play out? What would a world look like if you could actually use dragons? How would that counteract an air force, for an example? So again, I just love it. There's something so freeing about going in there and actually playing in the sandbox. I think to me that's the best. Probably the second I think would be the character development, because it really allows me to get to know these characters almost as if you're sitting across from them having a beer and they're explaining to you the most dramatic moments of their lives. Again, I've got battle scenes. I enjoy writing battle scenes, but at the same time, I don't know if I don't know if I could do that continually, right? And as I get into the final series, the sixth book in the series, it's very much almost going to be kind of like this Avengers Endgame style. It's just wars happening over here, wars happening over there. You have this front, that front, the other front, and everything's kind of coming together. So I don't know how that's going to go with writing. I love writing them, but I think they just take so much energy out of me because you feel like you've been in a fight by the time you're done. At least I do.
Justin, the second book that doesn't have a release date yet, does it?
Does not have a release date. I will drop a little scoop here in that my hope is to have it ready for next July. So the plan is to release one pretty much every summer until all seven are out, and we'll kind of go from there. Again, I mean, I'll have to like, that's also a discussion for the publisher as well. You got to work through those things with them. But that's what I would like to do. I think a year is probably about a good time to let it out. And talking to just some other authors and just trying to consume some of their content that they've put out. What I've always heard is that you never see a boost in sales for your first book like when you release your second book. And you get a hell of a boost on both of them when you release your third. So really trying to forecast, because for me, as I said before, the publicity is hard and the writing is a joy. And so I almost feel like I'm cheating when I spend more time writing than trying to publicize it. But I have to remind myself that in effect, by writing this next book and getting it out there, I am publicizing the books that are already there. So again, we'll see. I mean, life could get in the way, but that's my hope, to try to release one every year.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Mm.
Justin, a lot of the um, authors and other creative people that I've talked to, they always have some kind of project in the back of their mind, or they're kind of working on the side. Do you have any other projects in the works, or that you hope to in the
I,
future?
I do. So I started writing, and I also have a short story that's set in the world of Nineveh. I almost kind of see it as, I guess nowadays everyone's got something like an extended universe, right? Popularized by Marvel. But to me, there are a lot of opportunities in my series for spinoffs. And I don't know, and I've got a lot of ideas for spinoffs. Now, I don't know if I'm going to have time to write all those spinoffs, but again, if the book gets some traction and is popular enough, I would be most happy to democratize that out a little bit, right? I kind of have this image in my head. The main characters, Zeno and Alexandra, go through it's kind of Harry Potter, kind of like Spartan education system, schooling. And I think there's a great young adult story that could be told there, or a YA. I'm not the guy to write that YA, but I just think that would just be so delicious for someone that really had that skill set. I will tell you, I started writing, and it's because my daughter, I have a book of St. George and the Dragon, that, of course, old English legend, and it's beautifully illustrated. It's from the 80s. My mom used to read it to me. It was kind of a family heirloom that got passed down. Now I read it to my daughter, and she loves the story, just absolutely loves it. And I kind of got inspired, and I just started writing my own version of St. George and the Dragon. Again, a more of an adult version, a more nuanced version, lots of conflict, lots of gray going on. But again, it's basically the same story. And I honestly don't know, Dan. I've thought about maybe adjusting that and setting that up in the world of Nineveh as well. But as of right now, it's set in historic England. So we'll see about that. And then again, being a child of the 80s, my first love was He-Man, my second love was Ninja Turtles. So I feel like I might have some kind of ninja steampunk mutant inspired series in me. Again, that's going to be down the line. I want to finish this one first, but I can kind of see it in my mind's eye. So we'll see.
That would be interesting. Justin, you mentioned you have a short story. Is that online where people can check it out?
So it is not right now, but it should be hopefully by the end of the month. And the short story is called Women of the Red Sky. And there is a civilization in the book known as the Militai. And think of them as ancient Greek Amazons. They are a tribe of warrior women. In respect to their lifestyle, they're nomadic. In respect to their lifestyle, and in respect to their fighting style, again, you have to think something very much like the mounted light cavalry of the Comanche Indians, right? That's how they fight. And it's about speed, it's about hit and run, it's about using the horse, and also they also live in a very unforgiving environment. And this is how they've been able to fight and maintain their independence in a world where other armies are populated by men, but also those other armies have advanced weaponry and technology. They've been able to maintain their independence. And so there is a story about these women, again, fighting to maintain their independence. It's told from the perspective of an ethnographer who comes out to study the women. But I will say this, if anyone hears this podcast and is interested, shoot me an email, and I can give my email. It's justinmgermain at gmail.com, JUSTIN, M as in Michael, GERMAIN at gmail.com. I'm happy to send the story to anybody. I really do believe that, again, when you're first getting started as a writer, you have to be willing to give some of your product away for free, to let people know what kind of world you're building, get them invested, and also hopefully build some trust with the readers. And my hope is that people will they they read the book, they'll get them interested in the short story. And likewise, if someone says, okay, well, I don't want to commit to the book right now, but I can read the short story. We can read that, and hopefully that will pique their interest and get them into the book series.
Sure. And I will link your email address in the description for this episode so people can find
Thank
it.
you.
You also have a website, demetrioslopez.com. And can people
That's
learn more
right.
about your book there?
Absolutely. So what I have there is I have a couple things. One, I have a couple maps. And of course, there are maps in the book as well. But the maps in the books are black and white because publishers and money. Yeah. The ones online are very pretty. They're in color. I used the Incarnate software, so I guess a little bit of free publicity for them, for anyone that just loves to make fantasy world maps. They're great. Also, I have it linked where you can go through and not only just see the maps, but you can see the various like civilizations and people groups that live in this and that part of the world. There's also a lot of backstory. I go in and I explain some of the concepts in the book, some of the history in the book. Again, I wanted the website to be something where people could go to and look at it. And if they're like, okay, he's talking about this thing called the Allfire, that's very interesting how he's describing that. This is there something, but again, it's not what the book's about. It's a part of the story, but it's not the main focus. Okay, well, if you want to learn more about that, it's there on the website. Also, and I have to give a shout out to my very good friend Nicholas Kriazis, who is a wizard with AI art, and he was able to help me build some really, I thought, breathtaking pieces to put on the website and to help promote it. And we intentionally chose some of the scenes that I think are going to be most unique to readers. So there's one particular scene in the book. It's a battle scene between a brood of dragons and fighter aircraft, and they're attacking an aerial battle station. So again, think maybe the Cloud City for my Star Wars fans, and you have these X-wing fighter type aircraft, and then you have dragons going at it. And the dragons are bigger and they're hard to bring down, but they're also slower. So, and again, it's kind of like styles make the fight. But he helped me put together just a beautiful AI generated art piece of this battle. And again, it's not perfect. It is AI. We're still working the kinks out. But the image looks like something you just see it and you're like, oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen that. Like these two spaceships and dragons in the same, like that doesn't, like, whoa, let me get a good look at that. And it really sucks you in. And again, I hope people will, if they make it to the website, it'll give them sort of an image of some of the things that we're trying to describe in the book.
Okay. And what social media sites can people find you on?
So I am on Instagram under Demetrios Lopez. I am also on TikTok at Demetrios Lopez. So again, using the pin name for those. Again, the TikTok is relatively small right now. I've only got a handful of videos. I will say both on Instagram and TikTok there are trailers that a good friend of mine helped me put together that I thought was really well done. So you can check out the trailer for the book there. There is also, and again, a certain kind of nerd will they'll feel a little bit of brotherhood with me with this. There's a video of me playing Anvil of Crom, the theme from Conan the Barbarian, on the piano. I'm not a great pianist. As a matter of fact, Dan, I even say in the video, I'm like, if you want to hear me not play the piano anymore, buy my book and give me a reason to keep writing and give up my aspirations as a pianist. But no, again, I guess that was just sort of my way to connect with the kind of people that I think would really love this book, right? Again, it was very much born of He-Man, Robert E. Howard, Conan, Star Wars, those sort of like genre IPs that just have a very much a feel to them. And if that's the kind of things that resonates with you, I really do think you'll enjoy the book.
Very cool. And again, the book is Thumos Rising. I hope everyone checks it out. Justin, before I let you go, Halloween is right around the corner. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, what's your favorite horror movie?
I feel like this is a boring answer, but I think I got to go with The Shining. I got to go with The Shining. However, I will give an honorable mention. The Ring was also very scary, and I kind of had something happen to me and a friend when we went to watch it in the theaters that made it even kind of more scary, kind of cemented in my mind. But I will give an honorable mention to the film Lovely, Deep, and Dark, which is a movie that takes on this topic of people disappearing in national parks. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Dan, but my girlfriend brought it to my attention. We started watching a lot of Mr. Ballin videos. Again, a little bit of free publicity here, but about all the people that go disappearing in these national parks. And I'm just like I had no idea. I was just like, this is like I don't understand. Like, why can't we find them? Find any trace of them at all? Why do their shoes show up on rocks? Very odd. It I wouldn't say it was a super scary movie, but it was very it just felt the whole time like you were watching something you shouldn't be seeing. And it did its job. It very much had its take. What's your favorite horror movie?
Um, I would say The Thing.
The Thing. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, John
that's
Carpenter's The Thing.
yeah. You got to have some respect for John Carpenter. I don't know if I've actually
He's
seen the entire thing. I think I tried to watch it a long time ago, and it just scared the hell out of me. I think I stopped. I should do that this Halloween. Go back and finish it.
it is a scary movie.
Yeah.
Justin, so are you a fan of both versions of The Shining, or do you have a preference?
I got to go with the original Stanley Kubrick, and I know I never read the book, and I know people have said there was the made for TV one that I also saw that was supposedly more accurate and followed the book a little bit closer. And don't get me wrong, like that one was I think very disturbing as well. I don't know. Listen, I don't like hotels, and I sure don't like seeing little girls at the end of halls and hotels. Okay, it's just like that's all I got to see. It could be completely innocent. I'm out, like checking out. Like I'll sleep in the car.
Justin Germain, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you. And thanks everyone who joins us and listens to this episode. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, you can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Just search for a Happy Moment Podcast. And I will see you guys next time. Take care,
Bye
everybody.
bye.